The desert wind carried the faint scent of creosote and dust as Harlan Briggs stepped out of his weathered ranch house, coffee in hand, boots creaking under his weight. The sky was bruised purple, morning just beginning to show teeth. And somewhere out near the corral, a mule was still standing like a gravestone. 6 days now, and the damn animal hadn't touched a bite. Harlan narrowed his eyes against the rising sun and watched the creature, a gray, rough-coated mule, ribs poking out, one ear half chewed from some long-ago scuffle. No brand, no saddle, no rope burns. Just a strange, unclaimed ghost that had wandered in one evening, limping and collapsed beside the water trough like it had finally run out of world. He'd taken to calling her Hazel, on account of her eyes not brown, not green, something in between, always fixed on the western horizon like she was waiting for judgment. "Still no appetite, girl?" Harlan asked, walking up to the corral rail. He shook the bucket of oats in his hand. "Got molasses in this one. Fancy stuff." Hazel didn't blink, didn't budge. She stood like stone, gaze locked on the canyon trail where the sun now licked the distant ridgeline. "Suit yourself." Harlan set the bucket down and leaned on the rail, the ache in his knees flaring as it always did when storms were coming or ghosts were near. He wasn't sure which this was. Maybe both. Neighbors had already started wagging their tongues. Said she was a death mule, left behind by rustlers after a raid gone wrong. Bad luck, bad omen. Told him he ought to shoot her and bury the body before misfortune really settled in. But Harlan had buried enough in his life. He'd buried his wife 10 years back, his only boy before that. He'd buried dreams, friends, even the deed to half his grazing land after winter too long and a market too cruel. He wasn't about to bury a mule just for looking lonely. Not yet. The wind shifted. Hazel flicked an ear. Her ribs rose and fell in a deep, steady breath, but still she did not eat. Then came a sound. Hoofbeats, light, rhythmic, tired. Harlan turned and squinted toward the trail. Dust curled up like smoke from the ground. A rider was coming slow out of the red rock folds beyond the property line. A boy, small-framed, slouched in the saddle, clothes dust-covered and too big for his bones. He rode like someone who'd been riding too long, like the horse was holding him up more than the other way around. The closer he came, the more Harlan could make out straw hair, cracked lips, a look in his eyes like he hadn't seen kindness in years. The boy pulled up near the gate and nearly fell off the saddle. "Water?" he rasped. "Please, sir." Harlan nodded toward the pump. "Help yourself. Bucket's full." The boy staggered over, cupped trembling hands beneath the spout, drank like he was trying to swallow the whole earth. And then it happened. Hazel's ears snapped forward. Her body shuddered. Then she brayed, loud, long. It was no ordinary sound. It was the sound of a storm breaking loose inside her, a cry that curled down the spine like cold iron. She reared onto her hind legs and slammed against the corral fence, hooves crashing against the rails so hard they groaned and bent. The boy froze, water dripping from his hands. He turned slowly, his eyes locked with the mule's. Hazel's body trembled from head to hoof, nostrils flaring. She let out another bray, this one shorter, almost desperate. The boy staggered toward the corral like a sleepwalker. "Hazel," he whispered. The mule let out a soft, almost human cry. Harlan stepped back, heart hammering in his chest, the hairs on his arms rising. "You know this animal?" he asked. The boy nodded slowly, eyes filling with tears. "She's mine," he choked. "She was mine. I thought they killed her." Hazel pushed against the fence again, but this time not in panic. It was longing, She let out a deep, chesty nicker like she was pleading to be near him. Harlan looked from the boy to the mule, then to the trail behind empty, for now. He muttered to himself, voice low, as if afraid the wind might carry the truth too far. That mule ain't sick. She's been waiting for that boy. The boy sat on Harlan's porch like a busted shadow thin, wind-blown, and too quiet for someone his age. His hands cupped a tin mug of warm broth, but he didn't drink. His eyes kept drifting toward the corral, where the gray mule stood pressed to the fence rails, her eyes locked on him like she was still trying to believe he was real. "What's your name, son?" Harlan asked, settling across from him with a second cup in hand. The boy hesitated, then looked up through the dirt on his face. "Jesse," he said softly. "Jesse Boone." That name slid into Harlan's memory like a knife through soft cloth. Boone. He hadn't heard that name spoken in years, not since the story of a family wagon ambushed near Dry Pass. 3 bodies found burned, and the boy just gone. The saloon had a poster for a while, long since curled and yellowed. "You from up toward Dry Pass?" Harlan asked, keeping his voice easy. Jesse nodded. His shoulders sank as if the words were bricks piled on his back. "We were headed to Prescott. Ma had kin there. We never made it." Harlan waited. They came at dusk, 4 of them, faces covered, voices loud like they owned the canyon. Pa tried to fight back. They shot him first, then Ma. I was small, hid under the wagon axle. Thought I was dead for sure. His voice broke. Hazel stirred in the corral, letting out a low breath like she felt it too. They dragged me out, tied my wrists, said I'd be useful. Jesse sniffed, wiped his nose with the back of his sleeve. Called themselves the Coil Gang. Said their leader, Silas, was the one with the scar. Said I owed them for letting me live. Harlan felt heat rise behind his ribs. He'd heard the name Silas Coil whispered from cattleman and freight hauler's bank thief, train raider, killer who never smiled unless he was about to pull a trigger. "What did they make you do?" "Whatever they needed," Jesse said, staring down at the mug. "I was small, so they had me crawl through windows, unlock doors, scope out routes. I was their lookout. Said if I tried to run, they'd kill Hazel." He looked up then, eyes brimming but fierce. "They kept her with them just for that. Said she'd be the first to bleed if I ever went missing." Hazel let out a sharp bray like she understood every word. 3 years, Jesse muttered. 3 years of waiting, watching, pretending not to care so they wouldn't take it out on her. But I never forgot. Never stopped looking for a chance. Harlan nodded slowly, rubbing the side of his jaw with calloused fingers. He glanced again at the mule standing stiff and alert, as if every syllable of Jesse's story triggered an old memory buried deep in her bones. "So what changed?" Jesse blinked, jaw tightening. "A week ago, they hit a bank in Milford. I was supposed to unlock the alley door. I hid the key instead. Slipped out before dawn with a fresh horse. Been running ever since." He paused. Heard rumors at trading posts, folks talking about a mule turned up outside Dry Basin. One that wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, like she was waiting for someone. I knew it had to be her. "You found this place on hearsay alone?" "She was always smart," Jesse said with a small smile. "Smarter than most men. Used to follow me everywhere back home. Figured if she got away from them, she'd be looking for me too." Harlan was quiet for a long beat. There was something about this boy, the grit behind the grief, the fire behind the fear. He wasn't just running. He was surviving. Then something shifted in the air. A sharp breeze kicked dust across the porch. Hazel's head jerked westward, ears straight as nails. Harlan turned in time to see a thin trail of dust curling on the horizon. Low, fast-moving. Riders. 4, maybe 5. Not casual, not local. They were coming in like a pack with teeth. Jesse saw them too. He froze, then dropped to a crouch like muscle memory. "They found me," he whispered. "They always said they would." Hazel stomped once, hard enough to rattle the trough near her hooves. Her nostrils flared. She was no longer still. She was alert, agitated, staring toward the incoming riders with something close to fury. "You get in that corral," Harlan ordered, standing up fast and grabbing his rifle from the porch hook. "Stay low. Keep your hands on that mule. I reckon she'll die before letting anyone take you again." Jesse hesitated, then vaulted the rail and dropped beside Hazel. She circled him once, pressing her flank against his back, shielding him from the open land. Harlan walked to the edge of the porch and lifted the rifle. The sun had dropped just enough to silhouette the approaching horses. He squinted. Scarred face, broad hat, long duster. There was no mistaking Silas Coyle. They were closer now, close enough that Jesse could hear the jingle of bridles, the squeak of leather, the low growl of a man muttering to his horse. Hazel began to tremble, but it wasn't fear, it was readiness, like a dam about to break. And Harlan, standing firm on the porch, could feel it in his bones. The boy's past hadn't just caught up. It had brought hell with it. Hazel stood stiff in the corral, ears forward, like she recognized the scent of wolves. They came in slow. But they didn't come humble. The 4 riders crested the ridge like shadows bleeding out of the earth, dust curling around their boots and coats like smoke from something already burning. Their horses were lean and mean-looking, built for distance and escape, not comfort. They didn't smile, didn't wave. Just rode up until they were 20 yards from Harlan's porch and stopped like they owned the land under their hooves. The one in the center raised a hand in greeting, though his eyes held no warmth. He was tall, with skin like sun leather, and a long silver scar slicing down his left cheek. A wide-brimmed hat shaded the rest of his face, but the voice that came out was cold and certain. "Afternoon, friend." Harlan didn't move from the porch. His rifle was cradled across his arms, casual but ready. What's friendly about 4 strangers riding up without a "how do you do"? The man with the scar chuckled like gravel. "Just looking for a boy," he said. "He ran off from his kin a few days back. Fair-haired kid, skinny as a whippet. You might have seen him pass through." "Plenty of travelers on this stretch," Harlan replied, eyes steady. "Don't stop to measure everyone." The man's tone stayed light, but his words turned sharp. "He's got something with him we'd like returned. A mule, gray, one ear chewed up, might have wandered your way." Behind the corral fence, Hazel bristled, her ears snapping backward. Jesse crouched low behind her, his heart pounding so loud he feared it might betray him. Harlan kept his stance easy. What's a mule matter so much for? She's his. Another rider spoke short, jittery, with twitching eyes. "Boys attached. You know how kids are? Lord help us, his folks worry something fierce." Harlan raised an eyebrow. "That right?" "Funny, I heard the Boone family got wiped out near Dry Pass. Shot up, wagon burned. Nothing left but ghosts." A pause. Then the scarred man smiled, slow, unblinking. "Folks hear all kinds of things," he said. "Don't mean they're true." The short man tried again. "He's our nephew. Ain't well in the head. Makes up stories. Runs off. We just want to bring him home safe." Hazel suddenly snorted, loud and sharp. Her head jerked up. Her body trembled with the effort of staying still. Jesse pressed closer to her side, whispering to her like he had when they camped on moonless nights, telling her stories to keep the fear away. "Nice place you got here," the scarred man said, scanning the ranch. "Lonely, peaceful. Be a shame if trouble came looking." Harlan didn't blink. "You'll find I'm not fond of uninvited company, especially the kind that sniffs around talking in circles." The tension thickened, dry as prairie dust. That's when the nervous one's eyes landed on Hazel. "Hold up," he muttered. "Ain't that her? Ain't that the mule?" Harlan shifted slightly, planting himself square between the men and the corral. "She ain't yours, and neither is the boy." Scarface's hand moved near his hip, not to draw, not yet, but close enough to remind. "Friend, we're asking real polite. Don't make us less so." Before Harlan could answer, Hazel made a noise none of them had heard before. It wasn't a bray. It was a scream. The mule reared up on her hind legs, hooves crashing against the fence. Her eyes were wild, ears flattened, teeth bared like she'd seen the devil himself, and maybe she had. She dropped back down, snorting and stamping, nostrils flaring like gun barrels. Jesse tried to calm her, but she wouldn't stop. She remembered these men. She remembered everything. The scarred man's face shifted. Something in his eyes changed. He looked toward the corral and saw Jesse standing behind the mule, wide-eyed, fists clenched. "Well," he said softly, "ain't that a picture?" The air shattered. All four men began to spread out, forming a half circle around the front of the ranch. A trap, slow and practiced. The same kind they'd used on wagons and stagecoaches a dozen times before. "Come on out, boy," the leader said. "Ain't no point hiding. You know how this ends." Jesse didn't move. Hazel did, though. She stepped sideways, shielding him with her body. Then came a voice from behind. "I reckon it ends different this time." Every head turned. A man in a long coat sat horseback at the trailhead, flanked by two deputies. His silver badge gleamed in the sun like a challenge. His rifle was already in his hands, barrel tilted slightly downward, but ready to rise. Sheriff Alden Griggs. "I got a telegram from an old friend said something didn't smell right out here," the sheriff said, voice steady. "Rode through the night to make sure." The scarred man's lip curled. "Marshal don't have jurisdiction here." "Maybe not," Griggs said, "but murder does. So does kidnapping. So does forcing a child into felony work across 3 counties. The gang began to shift in their saddles, nervous now. Griggs lifted a folded paper from his coat. "Got a signed statement from a man named Carter. Before he died, he told us everything. Said Silas Coyle kept a boy as property, used him to case banks, held a mule hostage to keep him obedient." Silas's jaw clenched. He was lying. "Maybe," Griggs said, "but it seems that Mule disagrees." Hazel let out a low, guttural growl. It wasn't natural, not for a mule. It was animal memory, raw and unfiltered. "You're surrounded," Griggs said, "and I ain't here to talk." The scarred man's eyes darted to his men. One reached slowly for his pistol. The air felt like a powder keg, fuse already lit. Harlan didn't wait. He leveled his rifle, and so did Griggs. The deputies followed suit. For a beat, no one breathed. Then Silas Coyle hissed, "To hell with it!" But before he could raise his gun, Hazel screamed again and the air exploded. The moment shattered like glass under a boot heel. Silas Coyle's hand moved fast, but not fast enough. Sheriff Griggs fired first, the crack of his Winchester echoing across the dry basin like thunder on a clear day. The shot slammed into the chest of the nervous outlaw, the one who'd claimed Jesse was his nephew. The man was dead before he hit the dirt. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Two deputies flanking Griggs let loose, their shots clean and practiced. One bullet struck the shoulder of a second gang member who tried to flee, spinning him from his saddle in a howl of pain. The last rider bolted, but not before dropping his pistol and raising both hands. "I surrender," he yelled, eyes wild. "Don't shoot." But Silas didn't surrender. He ducked behind his horse, snarling, and squeezed off 2 wild rounds toward the porch where Harlan had already dropped to one knee behind the rain barrel. Bullets chewed splinters from the post beside him. One of them buzzed past his ear like a hornet sent from hell. Inside the corral, Jesse clung to Hazel, frozen for a heartbeat, but Hazel was not. The mule shifted suddenly, pushing Jesse backward with her body and stepping forward as if preparing for battle. She knew those gunshots, knew that danger had a name and a face, and its name was Silas Coyle. A second volley of gunfire tore through the space between corral and trail. Harlan leaned out and fired a single shot that grazed Silas's thigh, sending the outlaw sprawling with a snarl. Jesse scrambled behind the corral's water trough, heart racing. Hazel stood firm, her body a living barricade between the boy and the chaos. But Silas wasn't done. Bleeding and wild-eyed, he crawled behind a feed cart and screamed, "I ain't hanging for this. I'll kill that boy myself before I swing." He burst from cover like a mad dog, gun drawn, charging straight toward the corral, firing as he ran. One bullet slammed into the ground inches from Jesse's boot. Another ricocheted off the trough. Harlan shouted, "Jesse, down!" Jesse dropped, but Hazel didn't move. She'd been waiting 3 years for this moment. With a sound halfway between a roar and a war cry, Hazel charged. 1,500 pounds of fury slammed into Silas before he could fire again. His gun flew from his hand. He hit the dirt with a bone-cracking thud. Breath knocked clean out of him. Hazel planted herself over his chest, her hooves on either side, daring him to move. And he didn't. He couldn't. Silas Coyle, the butcher of Dry Pass, lay pinned in the dust under the mule he'd once used as leverage to enslave a child. His face twisted in agony, blood pooling beneath him. He tried to reach for his knife, but Hazel stomped her hoof down an inch from his hand, and the scream he let out was high and broken. "Enough," Sheriff Griggs said, striding toward the corral with his deputies behind him. His badge glinted in the sun. "You're done, Coyle." Silas tried to spit, but only managed blood. "That kid, he's lying. You got no proof." Griggs pulled a folded telegram from his pocket. "Got your man Carter's dying statement. Got Jesse's testimony. And I got 3 counties waiting to see your face hanging from a gallows tree. That's more proof than you'll need." Jesse stood slowly, trembling but steady. He walked to Hazel, knelt beside her, and laid a hand on her shoulder. "You saved me," he whispered. Again. Hazel nickered softly, her whole body relaxing for the first time in days. Griggs turned to Jesse. "You all right, son?" Jesse looked up, face streaked with dirt and tears, but his eyes were clear. "I am now." The deputies cuffed Silas with little ceremony. He didn't fight anymore. His mouth worked like he wanted to curse, but no sound came out. One deputy hauled the surviving outlaw to his feet, groaning and limping, while the second packed up the body of the one who hadn't been lucky. As they loaded the prisoners onto their horses and began the slow ride toward Sundown County, Sheriff Griggs lingered near the corral. He looked at Harlan, then Jesse. "This boy's gonna need protection," he said. "His story's big. Papermen'll come, lawyers, maybe bounty hunters wanting revenge. You ready for that?" Harlan glanced toward the porch, the bullet holes in the post, the water trough riddled with splinters, and then toward Jesse, who now leaned his head against Hazel's neck, safe for the first time in years. "I've stood guard over worse," he said, "and this time I ain't standing alone." Griggs nodded. "We'll get his name cleared, his record wiped. Hell, we'll print it in every paper from here to Phoenix. People ought to know what he's been through." Jesse didn't say much on the way back to the porch. He was too tired, too emptied out. Hazel walked beside him, limping slightly from a scrape to her hind leg, but still strong. As they reached the porch steps, Harlan reached out a hand. Jesse took it. "You've done your part," Harlan said. "Now let's figure out what comes next." Jesse looked up, hope flickering behind the fatigue. "I don't know where I go from here," he whispered. "You start right here," Harlan replied, "with folks who ain't gonna let go of you ever again." And as the sun dipped low behind the hills, painting the basin in fire and gold, Hazel lay down beside the porch for the first time since arriving, not as a prisoner or pawn, but as a guardian who had finished her watch. In that stillness, it was clear. Jesse Boone wasn't running anymore. He was home. Weeks passed like warm molasses, slow, thick, and steady. The days on Harlan's ranch found a new rhythm, not unlike a tune played from memory. The corral, once silent but for the sound of dry wind and wary hooves, now echoed with laughter and the scrape of boots, the occasional "whoa there" or "easy girl," drifting across the fields like dust devils in the wheat. Jesse Boone had begun to fill out, his arms no longer just bones and nerves, but lined with strength. His cheeks bore the color of sun and effort. The haunted look in his eyes, the one carved there by years of hiding and harm, had begun to recede, replaced by something else. Not quite peace, but close. He worked like a boy with something to prove, rising before dawn, helping Harlan mend fences, stack feed, check cattle. Hazel followed him like a shadow, never more than a dozen steps behind. And though her legs still bore a faint limp from her collision with Silas, she walked with pride head high, ears forward, as if the pain only reminded her she'd done what was right. "You ever seen a mule eat so well?" Harlan asked one morning, leaning on the fence post with a mug of black coffee. "She used to be picky," Jesse replied, tossing another flake of hay into her trough. "Now she eats like she's got a reason." "You both do," Harlan said, half under his breath. Word had spread, of course. Sheriff Griggs had made sure the truth about the Coyle gang and Jesse's part in it was printed from sundown to Prescott. Carter's confession, combined with the evidence and Jesse's own words, had cleared his name. No charges, no record, just a boy finally free to be one. Still, there were questions that hung in the air like old smoke. The biggest came in the form of a sealed envelope that arrived on the 6th Tuesday after the gunfight. Harlan stood on the porch with the letter in hand. Jesse stepped up beside him, wiping grease from his fingers with a scrap of rag. "It's from Arizona," Harlan said. "Postmarked Prescott." Jesse took it slow, peeled it open like it might tear itself apart. His eyes scanned the words. Then he stopped. "It's my uncle," he whispered. "Walter Boone. Says he's alive. Says he looked for us for a year before giving up. He thought we'd made it to California. But he's still in Prescott. Still waiting." Harlan nodded, trying to keep the weight of the moment from showing too much. "That's good news." Jesse didn't answer right away. He sat on the top step, Hazel coming to rest behind him. He ran his fingers through her coarse mane. "He wants me to come live with him. Says he's got a house and steady work as a carpenter." "Well," Harlan said gently, "he's family. That counts for a lot." Jesse looked up. "So are you." The words hung in the morning air, simple and heavy. Harlan swallowed hard. I reckon we all find family in strange ways, he said. The next morning, Jesse penned a letter with Harlan's help, explaining everything. Hazel, the ranch, the quiet safety he'd found. He didn't say no. He didn't say yes. He asked his uncle to come visit first. 2 weeks later, the stagecoach rolled in, dust trailing behind it like a story trying to catch up. Walter Boone stepped off, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s, with weathered hands and gray at his temples. His eyes locked on Jesse immediately, and for a moment, time seemed to hesitate. "Uncle Walt," Jesse breathed. Walter crossed the yard in 3 strides, wrapped the boy in a hug so tight it looked like he was afraid to ever let go. "I thought you were dead," he said, voice cracking. "I prayed, and I thought I was praying into nothing." "You weren't," Jesse said. "You never were." That night, the 3 of them sat on the porch while the stars turned slowly overhead, and Hazel snored beside the woodpile like she'd worked a double shift. They talked about the past, the future, and what a life might look like now that it wasn't built on fear. "I've been building homes for other people for 20 years, Walter said, sipping coffee. "Seems to me maybe it's time I built one for myself." Jesse looked at him, then at Harlan. "You'd stay here?" Walter smiled. "If Harlan'll have me." Harlan didn't hesitate. "Long as you pull your weight, Boone." They shook hands, the kind of shake men do when they mean it. That spring they built a new barn together, Jesse, Walter, and Harlan. 3 generations of pain, hope, and second chances, all swinging hammers in rhythm. Jesse learned how to measure timber without a chalk line. Walter learned how to ride a stubborn cow pony named Biscuit. And Harlan learned that a heart could still grow, even when you thought the soil was dead. Hazel watched it all, quietly, steadily, like she always had. One evening, while the sun melted into the hills and the sky turned to copper, Jesse and Harlan leaned on the new fence they'd just finished mending. Hazel stood a few yards off, grazing without a care in the world. "You know," Harlan said, "I never did thank her." Jesse grinned. "She wouldn't know what to do with it." "Still," Harlan murmured, "that mule didn't just bring you back. She brought something else with her, too." "What's that?" "A reason," Harlan said, "to believe folks like us still got one more good chapter left." Jesse looked out at Hazel and nodded. "She remembered," he said simply. Harlan sipped the last of his coffee, the air cooling against his cheeks. "Some animals remember more than we give them credit for," he said, voice low and certain. "That mule didn't just bring a boy home. She brought us all back to life." And as the wind blew soft through the fences and the sound of laughter came from the porch behind them, Hazel lifted her head, let out a slow breath, and returned to grazing like the guardian she'd always been. Stick around. There's another story waiting that might just hit you right in the gut. Click that next video to ride along a journey of grit, heart, and something you won't see coming. And hey, if these stories speak to you, hit that subscribe button. That one click helps us keep the fire burning and the tales coming. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.